I didn't retire to Pine Hollow Lake because I wanted a slower version of the same battles I'd spent 23 years fighting in the Marine Corps. I came because I wanted silence, the kind that settles over still water before sunrise, where the only sounds are a coffee mug touching old cedar and a loon calling somewhere through the morning fog. After decades of alarms, deployments, and people expecting me to make impossible decisions before breakfast, that silence felt earned. I bought a modest cabin tucked against the North Shore, rebuilt the old dock with my own hands, planted a few maple trees, and spent more time watching the weather than watching the news. For almost 8 months, life stayed exactly the way I'd imagined. Then one Tuesday morning, a woman I'd never met walked onto my dock without asking, stared at my boat like she was shopping for furniture, and casually informed me that it would now be available for neighborhood events. That's when I realized peace doesn't disappear all at once. Sometimes it arrives wearing expensive sunglasses, carrying a clipboard, and smiling like she's already won. Her name wasn't Skylar anymore. Around here, she was Monica Hale, president of the Harbor Ridge Community Association, though everyone simply called her Monica because saying her full title usually meant trouble followed. She looked polished enough for a real estate commercial. Perfectly pressed white pants, designer sandals that somehow stayed spotless on a dirt shoreline, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Beautiful morning," she said as though we were old friends. I nodded politely. "It usually is." She glanced toward my matte gray electric boat resting beside the dock. "We're organizing a community regatta next month. Everyone contributes something. Larger docks become temporary gathering points, and privately owned boats are generally shared for the day." I laughed because I honestly thought she was joking. She didn't laugh back. "I'm sorry," I said. "I don't think I heard that correctly." She tapped her clipboard. "The association has traditions that keep everyone connected." "That's great," I answered, taking another sip of coffee. "I'm just not part of that tradition." Her smile tightened. "The lake belongs to everyone." "The water does," I agreed. "This dock doesn't." She looked around as if expecting neighbors to appear and applaud her. When nobody came, she stepped farther onto my dock. "People around here believe in cooperation." "So do I," I replied. "Cooperation starts with asking before stepping onto someone else's property." That should have ended the conversation. With reasonable people, it usually would have. Monica wasn't interested in reasonable. She was interested in obedience. She left after another minute of rehearsed speeches about community values. But before driving away, she took several pictures of my dock, my boat, even the property markers I'd installed after buying the cabin. It was subtle enough that someone watching from across the lake might have mistaken it for admiration. I knew better. Old habits don't disappear after military service. You learn to recognize reconnaissance when you see it. Over the next 2 weeks, she returned 3 more times. Once with 2 board members. Once with a maintenance supervisor. Once by herself carrying a measuring tape. Every visit came wrapped in friendly language but pointed toward the same destination. She wanted control. Apparently, Harbor Ridge had spent years convincing homeowners that association rules mattered more than property lines. Most people found it easier to nod, pay the occasional fine, and move on with their lives. I wasn't built that way. Not because I enjoyed conflict. Quite the opposite. After everything I'd seen overseas, arguing over docks felt almost embarrassing. But there was something strangely familiar about Monica's confidence. She believed certainty itself created authority. She spoke loudly enough that people stopped asking whether she was actually right. My closest neighbor, an older widower named Calvin Brooks, wandered over one evening carrying 2 fishing rods and a worried expression. "She came by your place again?" he asked. "3rd time this week." He sighed. "You're not the first." That caught my attention. Calvin explained how Monica had convinced one family to remove a storage shed that was completely legal, pressured another couple into paying for landscaping they didn't need, and somehow persuaded several seasonal residents that the association could regulate privately owned shoreline equipment. "Most folks don't have the money or energy to fight," he admitted. "She counts on that." I leaned back in my chair and watched the last light slide across the lake. "Has anyone ever told her no?" Calvin smiled. "You're doing it." I wish I could say I ignored what happened next, but curiosity has always been one of my weaknesses. I started reading every page of the association bylaws, county property maps, shoreline easements, state boating regulations, everything I could legally obtain. Night after night, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by folders until one simple truth became impossible to miss. Monica wasn't confused about the law. She was exploiting the fact that almost nobody else understood it, and the more I learned, the more convinced I became that eventually she'd push too far. The funny thing about people who mistake confidence for competence is they rarely stop at small victories. They keep reaching because nobody has ever forced them to measure the distance. Around the same time, I finished installing the final upgrades on my boat. Most people saw a quiet electric fishing boat with a sleek matte finish. I saw something entirely different. Years of engineering projects had turned it into a floating security system with encrypted GPS logging, multiple hidden cameras, remote diagnostics, and a programmable safety lock designed to activate if someone tried operating it without authorization. Friends joked that I'd built the world's smartest fishing boat. Maybe they were right. What they didn't know was that every feature existed for one simple reason. I believed preparation was cheaper than regret. At the time, I never imagined that philosophy would soon collide with the most determined HOA president I'd ever met. And when it did, the entire community would end up watching the fallout from the shoreline like it was front row seats to a courtroom drama. The first real crack in Monica Hale's confidence appeared on a Saturday morning when she arrived with 4 volunteers wearing matching Harbor Ridge community shirts and carrying folding tables, banners, and enough coolers to host a family reunion. I was replacing a weathered board on the side of my dock when I heard tires crunching across the gravel road above my cabin. Monica waved like we were partners in some project I'd forgotten about. "Perfect timing," she called. "We're getting everything ready for next weekend's Lake Appreciation Day." I climbed down from the ladder. "Looks like you've got plenty of help," she smiled. "We do. We'll just need access to your dock and your boat around 8 next Saturday." "No," I answered calmly. She blinked. "Excuse me? No. You're not using either one." The volunteers exchanged awkward glances. Monica laughed softly, the kind of laugh people use when they expect everyone else to join in. "Nobody did, Nathan," she said, speaking slowly as though explaining something to a child. "This event has happened every year for nearly 15 years. Then I'm sure you'll figure out how to host the 16th somewhere else." Her smile disappeared. "You're creating unnecessary division. I'm protecting private property. You're embarrassing the neighborhood." "No," I replied. "I'm embarrassing someone who's gotten used to hearing yes." That ended the conversation, but it didn't end the problem. If anything, it convinced Monica that making an example out of me had become personal. 3 days later, I found a bright orange notice taped to my mailbox claiming my dock violated newly adopted community safety guidelines. The citation demanded that I either remove the structure or pay a daily fine beginning the following week. I almost laughed. Harbor Ridge didn't own the shoreline. The county did. The dock had been inspected before I bought the property and again after I rebuilt it. Every permit sat neatly organized inside a waterproof binder in my office. Still, I drove into town the next morning and met with the county zoning office just to be safe. The clerk looked over the notice for less than 30 seconds before raising one eyebrow. "These people don't have authority to issue this," she said. "That's what I thought." She photocopied the paperwork, stamped a letter confirming my compliance, and quietly added, "You're not the first person who's walked in here with one of these." Driving home, I kept thinking about Calvin's words. She counts on people not having the energy to fight. That afternoon, Monica appeared again, this time standing near the edge of my driveway before I even got out of the truck. "Did you get the notice?" she asked. "I did." "Good. We expect compliance." I handed her the county letter without saying a word. She skimmed the first paragraph, folded it, and handed it back. "County offices don't understand community standards." I couldn't help smiling. "Community standards don't overrule county law." Her face hardened. "We'll see." Most people would have heard that as a threat. I heard it as a promise. Promises are useful because eventually someone has to keep them. Over the next several weeks, little things started happening. Fresh tire tracks appeared near my dock after midnight. Someone untied my canoe and left it drifting 50 yards offshore. Decorative lights along my walkway disappeared one by one. None of it caused serious damage, but together it painted a picture. Someone wanted me annoyed enough to make a mistake. Unfortunately for them, patience had been drilled into me long before Monica ever discovered neighborhood politics. Instead of confronting anyone, I quietly added 2 more hidden cameras facing the shoreline and expanded the motion detection around the dock. Every visitor, every vehicle, every late-night stroll became another timestamp in a growing archive. Calvin noticed the new cameras one evening while we cleaned fish at my picnic table. "Expecting trouble?" he asked. "No," I said. expecting evidence. He chuckled. That's a very marine answer. Occupational hazard. A week later, another neighbor stopped by. Her name was Linda Foster, a retired school principal who had lived in Harbor Ridge nearly 20 years. She lowered her voice before speaking, even though nobody else was around. Monica's telling people your boat is dangerous. I looked up. Dangerous? Linda nodded. She says electric batteries can explode, that children aren't safe around it, that she's considering emergency action. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my wrench. Emergency action? She actually used those words. That's when something clicked. This wasn't about a picnic anymore. Monica needed justification. If she could convince enough residents that my boat represented some kind of hazard, she could package her obsession as community protection instead of personal control. Fear is remarkably effective when facts are inconvenient, so I attended the next HOA board meeting even though I wasn't required to. The clubhouse buzzed with quiet conversations until Monica spotted me walking through the door. Her expression froze for half a second before returning to its usual polished confidence. During the public comment period, she invited residents to voice concerns about unregulated shoreline assets. Everyone knew who she meant. She projected photographs of my dock onto a large screen, circled my boat with a laser pointer, and described it as a liability that threatened public safety because it lacked association oversight. When she finally asked whether anyone had questions, I stood up. I have one. The room fell silent. Can you show everyone the Harbor Ridge bylaw that gives this association authority over privately registered boats stored on privately owned docks? Monica shuffled several papers. It's implied under recreational management provisions. Which section? The spirit of the regulations. Section number? Her voice tightened. That's not relevant. I smiled politely. It becomes relevant when you accuse someone of violating rules that don't exist. Several homeowners began flipping through printed copies of the bylaws. I watched confusion spread across faces that had probably trusted Monica for years without ever reading the documents themselves. An older man finally raised his hand. I'm looking at the recreational section right now, he said. It only talks about common property, another resident added. It doesn't mention private docks either. Monica quickly moved to the next agenda item, but the atmosphere had changed. Doubt had entered the room. She hated doubt because authority survives uncertainty. After the meeting, Calvin caught up with me outside. You embarrassed her. No, I answered. She embarrassed herself. That makes it worse. He was right. 2 nights later, just after midnight, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from Dock Camera 3. I opened a live feed expecting another raccoon. Instead, I watched Monica standing beside my boat with a flashlight while 2 younger board members whispered behind her. They inspected the motor, took photographs, and even tried opening the storage compartment before leaving 10 minutes later. They never noticed the infrared cameras recording every second. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I simply archived the footage beside everything else. By then, the folder labeled Harbor Ridge had grown surprisingly large. Looking back, that's probably the moment the outcome became inevitable. Monica believed persistence would eventually wear me down because that strategy had worked on everyone else. What she couldn't understand was that every unnecessary visit, every false citation, every midnight inspection wasn't weakening my position. She was building it herself. The following Friday afternoon, I purposely loaded several fishing rods into the truck where passing neighbors could easily see them. I even mentioned to Calvin, loud enough for nearby gardeners to overhear, that I'd be spending the weekend visiting an old friend nearly 2 hours away. None of it was true. It was theater, carefully staged for an audience that had become accustomed to watching my routines. After sunset, I parked inside an unused maintenance barn owned by another veteran across the lake. From there, I had a clear view of my cabin through binoculars without anyone knowing I was nearby. The boat remained tied loosely to the dock exactly as always. Batteries fully charged. Systems quietly armed beneath an ordinary-looking console. Around 9:30, the shoreline stayed empty. At 10:15, a family paddled by in kayaks. At 11, the lake settled into complete darkness except for scattered porch lights reflecting across the water. Then, a little after 11:40, headlights appeared at the end of my driveway. A black SUV rolled silently toward the cabin before stopping beneath the trees. Monica stepped out first. 2 board members followed carrying flashlights and a small toolbox. One of them asked, "Are you sure he's gone?" Monica answered with absolute confidence. "He won't be back until Sunday." I leaned against the barn wall and quietly exhaled. People often imagine traps as complicated machines or dramatic surprises. Most of the time, they're much simpler than that. You just give someone enough confidence to believe the bad decision was entirely their own. From my phone, I watched 3 live camera feeds as Monica untied the ropes securing my boat, climbed into the driver's seat like she already owned it, and proudly announced to the others, "Tomorrow we'll tell everyone we impounded it for safety." She pressed the power button. Ghost awakened without protest, exactly as I designed it to. And for the first 3 minutes, everything worked perfectly. That was always the plan. For exactly 3 minutes, Monica looked like she'd won. Ghost slipped quietly across the lake while she smiled at the 2 board members beside her, already talking about how she'd tell everyone the HOA had secured community property. Then the security system quietly did what it had been designed to do years earlier. The motor reduced power, the console locked itself, and every onboard camera uploaded video, GPS data, and operator logs directly to my cloud account. I waited a few minutes before calling the sheriff. "My boat has just been stolen," I said. "I have live video of the people taking it." When deputies arrived, the whole story unraveled in minutes. Monica insisted the boat belonged to the community. But when Deputy Aaron Mitchell asked for a single document proving she had permission to enter my property or operate my boat, she had nothing. One nervous board member accidentally admitted she'd told everyone I was out of town and that taking the boat would be completely legal. Between the dock cameras, the onboard recordings, the GPS logs, and the county records proving my dock was fully compliant, there wasn't much left to argue. The investigation quickly expanded beyond that night. More homeowners came forward with stories of false violation notices, intimidation, and rules that simply didn't exist. At the next HOA meeting, residents demanded answers instead of accepting excuses. Within weeks, Monica resigned. Several board members stepped down, and the association was forced to rewrite its policies after legal review made it painfully clear that private property was never under HOA control in the first place. A month later, I was back on my dock before sunrise with a cup of coffee, watching Ghost float quietly beside me exactly where it belonged. Calvin paddled past, grinned, and said, "Guess nobody's borrowing your boat anymore." I laughed, not without asking. Looking back, people often ask why I didn't stop Monica before she untied the ropes. The truth is simple. Some people never believe they're wrong until their own decisions become the evidence against them. I didn't destroy her reputation. I simply gave her enough room to show everyone exactly who she was. Now I'm curious what you think. Would you have stopped her immediately? Or would you have let the evidence tell the story? Let me know in the comments because I honestly think this one could go either way. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who's ever dealt with an HOA that forgot where its authority ends